starting at Sister Rosetta Tharpe,
right,
and going all the way to Brittany Howard from
Alabama Shakes.
Alabama Shakes. Sorry,
Yes.
my brain's not working there
That's
anymore.
That's
So
what I'm
how why 50?
That my publisher picked the number 50.
The publisher.
Yes,
50.
it was
Okay.
random.
And it was.
At 35,
Did it
I
seem
wanted
like a
to
good
murder
number?
someone.
What?
It seemed like a good number when I was done. It was great.
It's not 100.
Oh God.
But I mean, one cool thing about the book is, I mean, and you say this in the intro, I think, you can't go into like in-depth like biographies of 50 women. That would be unwieldy.
Right. Well, I mean, I had about 1,000 words per person, and summing up anyone's life in 1,000 words is not really doable.
No.
And so I picked stories that reflected who they are as artists, and that was my approach. And I wrote another book last year about Aretha Franklin, and I kind of approached it the same way, with essays about her in Detroit and her connection to that city and the word diva. And so, you know, I've been a storyteller in one way or another my whole weird cobbled together career.
But the rock and roll woman book is like 50 books shrunken down.
Kind
way,
of,
right?
yeah. That's
I mean,
what it felt like.
Because
when I was
like
writing it.
one cool thing about it is that you can just pick a woman, just pick a woman,
Right.
and read about her.
But not in the way David talked about.
No. Let's can we all just you know move on.
Well, I was in bands too, you know. I suppose.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
how did you pick them? But that, I mean, this is an obvious question.
It was hard.
But you knew I was going to ask it. So
It was very
how
difficult.
did you pick 50?
Well, we had this working list, and my editor, I have a wonderful editor, Ed Sterling, who helped me, Barbara Berger, who's she's very well known in that world. And she and I went back and forth, and, you know, I was looking for who had great impact, and I was building these little narrative arcs within this overarching narrative in the book. So,
But I mean, I mean, to me, they're all women who have a strong voice and who seem to kind of be they're distinctive amongst each other, and they all seem to have been kind of, maybe this is an overreach, but sort of in charge of their own voice. And when I say voice, in a broader sense, would you say that's true?
A very incisive observation.
Well, thank you. But you know, her backstory is kind of cool and interesting. I mean, she wasn't like a product of some machine churning out that music of that era.
Right, she was on her way to Juilliard to be an opera singer, and she fell in love with Led Zeppelin and decided she wanted to do rock, and she was so not a rock and roller. And then she met her partner and guitar player and husband, and they're still together, Neil Giraldo, who's an amazing guitar player. And, you know, she like literally fought her way into rock, and everyone told her, you can't do this, and women don't sell out arenas, which she did. And also MTV helped, because she was the second artist to be played on MTV.
Really?
Which, yeah, everybody knows video killed the radio star, right? The Buggles, first one. Logical, it makes sense to launch that channel with that video. But the second one was Pat Benatar, doing that You Better Run song and like looking right into the camera and like double tap it. Like she was a badass, right? Strutting in, you know.
Well, not to just dwell on Pat Benatar forever, but
I could really dwell on all of these women forever.
but she was tiny, like 5 feet tall, I think.
Yeah,
and
still
I think
is.
one thing you mentioned is that she kind of got scrappy. She learned to be scrappy early on, partly due to her stature. At
Right.
least that's kind of the story. So it sounds like she was kind of a badass in the business.
She says she knocked the kids' tooth out when they were little because he said, you can't be a singer. So I think that's a good place. Start on the playground, you know, people are telling you, especially for women, because back then there was, you know, people said, this is not for you, or like Pat Benatar, Melissa Etheridge, a lot of the women in the book heard from radio programmers, we have a woman on the playlist, we don't need two. I mean, it's, yeah, it's incomprehensible, but it really happened.
There's always been women singers, right, for as long as pop music has been around in this country. But it seems like there's been some transition to having them not just be the singers of other people's songs and being more in charge of the whole package, in addition to playing instruments and fronting bands and all that.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because one of the things I to do in the book is I wanted to celebrate their artistry, because they're all great artists, and most of them are pretty well known. But I also wanted to acknowledge the work they did that isn't often recognized. Like Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who was inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame, right? In the middle of writing this book, that news came out. I was thrilled. She's chapter 1. You know, we always credit guys with inventing rock and roll.
She's woman number 1.
She's woman number 1, and she deserved to be. Johnny Cash, Elvis, Carl Perkins, Little Richard, they all loved her. But even the people who know who she is don't often credit her as being an electric guitar pioneer, because she was one of the first musicians to pick up an electric guitar in the 30s, when it was a relatively new consumer item, you know, along with T-Bone Walker and Les Paul and Lonnie Johnson and Rosetta Tharpe. But you don't hear her name mentioned as often alongside those guys. So throughout the book, I strove to, you know, acknowledge that. Even for people who are really famous, like Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie, incredible songwriters, they wrote all the hits. But everyone always talks about the drugs and the affairs and all the other stuff, and sometimes I feel like their prodigious talents get lost in all of that salacious stuff, which nothing wrong with the salacious stuff. Everybody likes gossip, especially, you know, when it's famous people.
Salacious stuff.
And the book has lots of that.
Salacious stuff, don't you? Editor of Guitar World magazine.
I was their first woman editor.
Was that good, bad?
It was fun. I got to interview a lot of people and review gear, and you know, there were like 9 of us, and we all kind of did everything, and it was a small.
Free stuff?
I got some free stuff. I didn't have a lot of rank
Any
there.
like vintage Martins that?
Oh yeah, mine are outside on the table next to Matt's. I didn't get a lot because, you know, that ad sales, they take everything, and everybody knows that. So, but it was interesting. It led to a lot of other really excellent gigs for me. I wrote for Rolling Stone and Entertainment Weekly and Salon.com and a lot of .coms that are no longer. And I worked at MTV, and it just opened up a lot of worlds for me in terms of writing and meeting musicians and stuff.
As a parting question, since the clock is going to kick us out of here soon, do you have any thoughts about being a musician as a woman in New York, since this woman theme is shot through this conversation at least?
It was always fine. I mean, in the 90s, we toured, and it sometimes wasn't so fine out there in the world, where I would walk into a bar with my guitar and people would say, "Oh, is that your boyfriend's guitar?" You know, even though I was standing under a poster of my band. And so, but that never happened in New York. And in the 90s and the early aughts, it was kind of the last gasp of all these great bars where you could play, and we played at Brownie's. That was our place. When it had no stage. So at first we were like eye level with the audience, and then it had like a little stage, like 6 inches, and then it had like a foot stage. And I was the bass player in a lot of these bands, and my headstock was in the way of the hallway to the restroom. So whenever someone had to pee, I would have to lift up the guitar, and I had a Fender pee, so that was not lost on me either, so I was laughing in my head every time I had to lift up
those were the days.
Yeah, those were fun.
Where can people get your book?
Anywhere, Amazon.com. I would suggest your local bookseller, because it's nice to support your local bookseller.
And tell us the official name of the book, so I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Rock and Roll Woman, the 50 Fiercest Female Rockers, and the other book I had published last year is Aretha, the Queen of Soul, which is an absolutely stunning photo book of Aretha that honors her and all the things she did, the charitable work she did that people don't always talk about. Her arrangement genius, you know, everyone knows she was a great singer. People don't realize what a brilliant arranger of music she was, because she didn't get credit until Amazing Grace, which she produced in '72. So yeah, there's a lot of that in that book too. Yeah, I know, right? That was how it was for about a year and a half.
Not cool.
That's right, but it's starting to be recognized now, the work of all these women that, you know, they were trailblazers in music, but for all of us, I think, no matter what kind of job you have, you know, these women paved the way for you in some way. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Meredith. Say thanks to Meredith Ochs.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.